morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. And I should say Tony Elliott, our Director of Parks and Recreation, had hoped to be with us this morning and was instrumental in putting this presentation together, but unfortunately he's come down with a bad fever. So I'm going to carry on and share with you the message we put together. And doing this, we're shifting perspective a little bit, moving from a watershed scale, as Donna mentioned, into within the city limits, what's happening along the river. And that's an area that Parks and Recreation is really involved in as we manage a number of properties along the river. So what I'd like to do is share with you, just at an overview level, 3 answers to this question, what is the river for? Answers that overlap and at times conflict. And then we'll take a virtual tour of the properties that Parks and Rec manages along the river, showing how these different answers come into play in specific situations, telling you a little bit about our current management activities in various areas and some of our plans for the future. And then try to wrap it up with a little bit of a vision for how we might be able to synthesize these different perspectives on the question of what is the river for. So, the river, as we know, talking as we did with our little trivia about the 1955 flood, serves an important infrastructure function for the city, especially in this lower reach. Not only is it part of our water supply and provides drinking water for the community, but the channelization of the river and the levees that were constructed provide really key flood protection for the city, which not only is a public safety issue, but also an economic issue, since people who live within what otherwise would be the floodplain benefit from discounted flood insurance rates, and we have so many economic drivers, businesses down within what would otherwise be the floodplain. So infrastructure is an important element of what the river is doing for us, and an important answer to that question of what is the river for. But I think if the river were purely infrastructure, many of you wouldn't be here today. We also know that the river provides important habitat. And we have talks coming up this afternoon about the salmonid populations in the river. We could easily have talks, and I'm sure you have on other occasions, about the bird life that uses the river. And so we want to think about the ways in which the river can also serve these habitat functions down within city limits. And then finally, importantly for those of us in Parks and Recreation, the river is a recreational feature of our community in the form of the river walk, the parks along it, and potentially opportunities to be in the water itself. So these are the 3 broad answers to the question of what is the river for that I want to kind of delve into a little more detail with as we move our way from north to south along the river. So the first city-owned property that borders the river, which is part of the Parks Department's purview, is Sycamore Grove within Pogonip Open Space. And we know that this area had historic recreational use, but it's been kind of closed off to recreational use in the present day. It has important floodplain functions. In some ways, the infrastructure there is more of a green infrastructure or a natural systems model. The floodplains would just move up and through the Sycamore Grove area. And as such, it provides important habitat, both for plants and wildlife. And we're hopeful that at some point in the future, we may be able to realize what is outlined in the Pogonip Master Plan, for there to be an interpretive trail through this area, possibly even some sort of permanent nature center, because it is such a beautiful spot along the river and a place that it would be great to re-engage the community with. Coming down now south of Highway 1, we have more of the channelized levee portions of the river, which from a parks perspective, we think of as the river walk. And again, this is a great recreational piece along the river with the pathway running the full distance for running, biking, also commuting. But it also is a place that has habitat potential, and I think is one of the areas that we have challenges realizing that potential. So we have a sort of inboard-outboard distinction along the levee, with the inboard areas being managed by Public Works, really being managed more as infrastructure for water conveyance, for flood control, sediment removal. But on the outboard portions, which are the portions actually managed by Parks and Rec, those areas from the levee crest out from the water, there is a plan in place. The landscape plan, and Councilmember Myers referenced many of the native plantings that have been done along there historically. And we hope, in partnership with some of our community partners, to continue to develop and enhance those plantings so that we can have at least a greater measure of native vegetation along the banks of the river. San Lorenzo Park is really one of our most problematic parks in the park system, but one that has tremendous potential due to its central location along the river. So it has, fun recreational features like the playground and the duck pond with the stage there. Serves as a great venue for events, but it's somewhat disconnected from the neighborhoods around it. It also was the site of our San Lorenzo Benchlands encampment recently, and has sort of an ongoing social set of challenges that accompany it. So we are planning this sometime during 2019 to begin a design process for re-envisioning San Lorenzo Park. And we'll be reaching out to various stakeholders in the community to help us understand what you all want to see from that park, what it could be, and help us balance out those many different possibilities. We have just fun places along the river. This is Mike Fox Park. We have the Ken Wormhouse Skate Park featured here. And so the river becomes a great just connector to string together all the beads of these parks along it. And at Mike Fox Park, we not only have the skate park and basketball courts, hockey, roller hockey opportunities, and a small community orchard that grows there. So again, a different way to sort of engage the community, and some more of the native plantings, which were recently enhanced through an effort by AmeriCorps and our watershed partners. So thank you. Speaking of problematic parks, we have Jessie Street Marsh, just a little bit further down the river. One of the natural estuarine environments along the river that now has been cut off. With, again, great potential to serve more of a flood control function, more of a habitat function, as well as to provide recreational opportunities in a way that it doesn't at all now, where it's basically cut off from the adjacent areas. So again, we are working on a planning process to figure out some different approaches that we might take to developing that park, both again to create habitat value, but also to engage people in that site. So pay attention to the Parks and Recreation Commission agenda in coming months, because we hope to be bringing some of those plans forward for further review. And then at last we get down to the river mouth, and I think we know that Donna mentioned the river mouth project that is in the works down there, with this great balancing between the infrastructure and the habitat functions. And of course the beach itself provides great recreational amenities. And our Wharf and Beaches crew work on keeping that beach clean, making it accessible, and working with Public Works on sort of managing that whole environment down at the river's mouth. So that's just a quick tour from north to south within the city-owned portions of the river. But I want to sort of answer that question again of what is the river for, by saying for us in Parks and Recreation, we look at the river at the human scale. So it's not specifically about the broad-scale hydrological or climatological trends. It's not so much about the species-specific management plans that are in place, but what role do people play in this environment, and how do all of these different factors come together to impact people? So in some ways, the human scale is where a lot of our challenges lie. We have, again, challenges with illegal camping along the rivers, with pollution, with also disagreements about what the river really should be doing for us. But it's also the area where we have tremendous opportunities, and that's why these photos are here for two recent volunteer groups that worked along the river. Some from our Downtown Streets team, and then again this AmeriCorps group that helped us out at Mike Fox Park. So at the human scale, there are great opportunities for us all to come together and be involved in answering this question of what is the river for. And so that's really, as we look to the future, how we in Parks and Rec like to think about it. We know that the river is going to have to continue to serve these triple functions of infrastructure, habitat, and recreation. And it's not easy to know in any given circumstance which of those values should take precedence or how we can bring them together in a mutually satisfactory way. But what's exciting to me and to Tony about opportunities like today is that we're bringing together all of these stakeholders to learn more about the river in all these different ways, and hopefully to engage in dialogue with each other. And then when we see each other in a different context, in a planning commission meeting or a Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, knowing a little bit more about each other and the perspectives that we bring so that we can work together to integrate these three different answers and really have a hopeful vision of what the river can be for at the human scale. Thank you.